We begin our scene with a woman running up a dark and creepy staircase. She's terrified. The creature is after her. She hides in a closet, but she hears it coming into her room, looking for her. Just when she thinks it's safe, the closet door blasts open. The beast looks her in the face and says,
"Ooh, I found you, lady. I'ma eat you now."
Yeah. Pacing and tone are critical to hit notes of your genre, and squeezing the most development into your characters with those confines can be tricky. So let's avoid the Cookie Monster and get to business. I'm DC Ferguson, and this is the Worldbuilding Dojo. It goes without saying that you probably want to know the story that you want to tell, and that's a good start. It's also critical to understand how that genre is handled, what pitfalls and traps exist, overused tropes, etc. In short, we want to know how our genre is written. But DC, are you actually arguing for being cliché? Okay, guy who talks to his monitor, it's a little early for you, but the quick answer is no. Understand that we can tell our story how we want to tell our story. As a matter of fact, playing with established genre patterns can create some delightful results. For example, we want to tell our story in space. That's our setting. We want it to be horror, we get aliens. We want it to be a western, Firefly. If we want it to be a war film that doesn't take itself seriously, Starship Troopers. We want to take ourselves very seriously, you get Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Understanding your genre sets the tone and pace of your story, so for that, we need more charts. See, a non-stop action story is going to scale very, very low on character development. You get a little break to breathe 2 or 3 times in the story to expand characters, and the rest of the time you're setting up action scenes and executing them. On the other end of the spectrum, we have dramas and romance, which will always be very high on character development and very low on action. Pacing will be slow, we want to stop and smell the roses, but more importantly, we'll want to understand why the character was sniffing a bunch of flowers anyway. Now, I've touched on this whole bunch of different things there related to genre, and we're going to get to expand on those in a moment, but the core advice here is never going to change. Understanding what genre you're in determines how your characters move through the story. There are countless good examples that probably spring to mind because we all know the best of the best. You want great crime? You grab The Godfather, Casino, or Heat. The best courtroom dramas? You get 12 Angry Men, To Kill a Mockingbird, or A Few Good Men. The problem is more stark to see when it's done poorly, so let's take a look at the recent outing of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. See, popcorn flick or not, this film starts with this kind of Indiana Jones vibe of action-adventure, performing a rescue on a crumbling island, and then it transitions back and forth between horror, action, and a kids movie? It can't ever decide what it wants to be, and trying to solve all those masters weakens the overall experience. See, the reality is that dinosaurs are wild, savage animals at the end of the day, and showing their true savagery would be too intense for a kids movie, so it gets sanitized. The horror of being stalked by a killing machine can be tense, but again, can't dial up that intensity too high because of the kid factor. So we inject a little bit of humor in there, a little romance, a subplot about a little girl and her grandpa. What you get is a hot mess where the story can't ever find its pacing or tone, and while some scenes work for each group, the overall whole makes you wish they cut some things out. So maybe kids want the kissy face scenes cut because they're boring. Or maybe I want the kid scenes cut because I came to watch dinosaurs rip a man in two. And so on it goes. The point is, don't invite me to your evisceration party and then start the night with a poetry reading. So we've got our genre nailed down. How much development is too much character development? Well, there's no certain formula, that's the short answer. A lot less about rules here, it's a lot more guidelines. For example, we know this guy is Neo. What's his real name? Jeff Anderson. Working a dead-end job in a cubicle, one of the world's greatest hackers by night, he's always felt like there was something more to this world. Now, I know all this, because Morpheus told me. Check out what you didn't know. What were his parents like? Did he go to college? If he's so good with computers, why is he stuck in a dead-end job? In this regard, we only know and understand Neo as a passing acquaintance. The world building of The Matrix is so perfectly done that you forget that at the end of the day, it is an action movie. Little to no character development takes place in this film. This actually becomes a problem in the later sequels once new characters start jumping out of the woodwork every 5 minutes and no one has time to show off who they are, but that's an aside. The point is, one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made, and you had to Google whether I was right about Neo's first name. Then you found out I was lying because it's really Thomas. Yeah, not messing with you this time. His name is Thomas. You see what I did there, though? And the best part is, it doesn't matter. His real name literally has nothing to do with your enjoyment of the film. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is drama, and for that, we're going to look at The Breakfast Club, the John Hughes classic. The movie stands up well enough to the test of time, in part thanks to remarkable and sharp dialogue. The voices of each character in this film is so distinct and authentic, you actually feel you know them by the end of the movie. Basically, 5 high school kids from vastly different walks of life spend a Saturday afternoon in detention. The film barely moves from the large library they're stuck in and never leaves their school at all. There is no crux to this film, no major climax to be overcome, no bad guy to beat. In essence, it's a superhero team-up movie without a bad guy. It is the origin of how 5 kids who would never have associated with each other find common ground on the deepest level and form a bond. Tragically, that bond may not even survive the afternoon, and they know it. It's brutally honest, hysterically funny, and as quotable as any good comedy of the last 2 decades. The movie is pure dialogue, start to finish. That means it is non-stop character development, because there isn't anything the film is trying to accomplish. It's literally made of character development. Now, you can point to action movies with outstanding character development, or dramas with painfully little development at all, but it's important to note that this last one deserves a whole segment unto itself. The biggest problem with character development is always going to be in the execution of it. Do it right, and you have living, breathing characters that pop off of a page. Screw it up, and you have The Room, The Last Jedi, Jar Jar freaking Binks. You get the point. So, we don't want Jar Jar levels of stupidity. How do we avoid the pitfalls of cardboard cutout people in our work? If you've already been watching my videos for a while now, you've seen this one right here, and you know the answer is in the way characters relate to the world around them. Sure, but mostly how they relate to other people in it. I hear your doubts, but once we get to example time, you're going to realize you can hate a character, their actions, even the entire film, and want to come back for more. Think about it, since you've already done it, if you've ever enjoyed an episode of Breaking Bad, or our man here, Scarface. The best tip I can ever offer for great dialogue is to have a conversation with yourself. Yeah, I mean it. The biggest mistake bad writers make is to use the tropes, cliches, and speaking conventions of other works they've enjoyed. In that regard, your work becomes a copy of a copy, and you get corny or quaint dialogue that sounds like an interpretation of a conversation rather than a real one. You know the voices of your characters. If you can't speak for them, who can? That brings us to deep cut time, because you know I always have a weird one for you. This time, we're talking about the 1986 indie film River's Edge. If I could sum up this movie, imagine if The Breakfast Club was made up of nothing but the worst, most degenerate trash on the planet, and their attempts to cover up a murder by one of their friends for another one of their friends. It's a drama that borders on horror. Not the jump out and scare you kind, the kind that makes your skin crawl because you know people like this are out there. The film has Soleil Moon Frye, fresh off of her stint as Punky Brewster, a very young Keanu Reeves, and Crispin Glover, Dennis Hopper, Ione Skye, basically a bunch of A-class actors at the top of their game long before many of them were even known. The acting is outstanding, and in that, there is not one single character that's likable in this movie. Every single one of them is damaged somehow, with varying degrees of redeemable qualities, the best of them only qualifying for the bare minimum. If you watch this film, and oh my god, I really hope you do, know this: you leave the film feeling dirty. But at the same time, there's a magic in it that won't let you turn it off in the middle. You're watching horrible people keep making the wrong decisions over and over, and associate with the worst people, and their group actually makes each of them more toxic when they're teamed up. With the way I describe it, you'd think I hate this film, but the truth is the opposite. I think that I've seen this movie about 4 or 5 times over the years, and I would drop everything to watch it if I caught it while it was on TV. It is that good. Now we're getting to the meaty part. So far, we've only talked about the window dressing of character development and pacing. So now let's get to the meat of it. In the nuts and bolts of character development, it's not enough to spill the beans about all the details that make your characters tick. As a matter of fact, it's a big no-no. The term info dump and exposition, they go hand in hand here. They're both long-winded lines of dialogue, be it internal or to another character, that explains every detail. Remember, we're writing and creating. We show, we do not tell. Now, what does that phrase really mean when it comes to character development, though? What does it look like? Well, for one, it has a lot less I statements. A simple example here. Tough guy on the left doesn't take crap from anybody. You know that because he told you. Now that's the telling part. He's telling. Now look at the guy on the right here. No two ways about it. These two guys are literally saying the same thing, but one of them talks about who he is. The other one shows it. Let that one sink in. Really think about it for a second. You know when people are doing the one on the left. They're lying to you. I'm not one to gossip, but come on now. You know she's lying to you. I'm an alpha male. No, he's not. Part of authentic displays of personality, like in the real world, is never having to tell someone. But DC, I'm scared. I don't want to be vague. I want my characters to be clearly defined. Well, guy who's still talking to your monitor, why do you feel that way? Why would any character you create be clearly defined? How many people do you know are clearly defined? The truth is, interpretation of your characters is always going to be subjective. And what do I mean by that? Well, some people only went to go see Jurassic World to cheer on the raptors. See what I mean? You can't try to shoehorn your characters into certain molds by sacrificing authenticity, because at the end of the day, it's not worth it. As a member of your audience, if I'm not the type of person who likes a tough guy that won't take crap from anyone, I'm not going to like him no matter how hard he tells me. So, for a really bad example of this in action, I would actually suggest Bella Swan in the Twilight series. As a film, I could do without it. I was never a fan. As a story, though, Bella and Edward are a train wreck as characters. Throughout the book and film, they are constantly telling the audience who they are and what they believe through conversation with each other. The writer is using the dialogue as an excuse to define the boundaries of their personalities, going off with that "I'm not like other boys" nonsense. In this regard, the mirror is your best friend. Talk to it. Have a conversation amongst your characters. Each of them should have a distinct voice and background, and if you're really lucky, they might even say something that surprises you. With a good character and the proper genre for pacing, that leaves one element to nail correctly, and that's tone. It's easier to jump right to examples because we can see when it's right and we can see when it's wrong. We're going to kick off with the intros to two very, very different movies that both start very much the same. So let's begin with Saving Private Ryan, which introduces us to the film in the shock and horror of D-Day on Omaha Beach in World War II. Immediately setting tension across every person the camera lays eyes on, we know something bad is coming. The reality is still somehow worse. Attacking the beach is akin to walking men through a blender. The best hope to survive is that there are enough men in front of you to take the bullet instead. It is one of the truest, most jarring and grotesque depictions of war ever put to film, and it is frightening in its realism. There is no quiet in this opening. The din of bullet fire, explosions, and men crying out in pain is all around you. You have to listen in as the characters scream over it all to hear what they're saying. In that regard, even the audio is designed to immerse you in the chaos of the battlefield. Every inch across the beach to cover is a harrowing walk through another round of men that won't make it the whole way there. Now, let's compare that to the intro to Star Wars: The Last Jedi. We open on a planetary base being evacuated. The First Order suddenly appears in the sky. We might not make this in time. An ominous, beastly cannon takes aim. The merciless leader of the First Order demands that the scary cannon be primed for a devastating attack on the planet. A lone ship, a tiny fighter, flies out to the largest of the capital ships, a dreadnought. Dark and evil and imposing, the First Order commander demands their surrender. The pilot of the Resistance radios back and says, "Okay, I'll hold." A scene with this much tension and such high stakes has absolutely no room for comedy whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the very idea that a grizzled war vet and pilot like Poe Dameron is supposed to be, deciding that the best stall tactic at his disposal is his amazing epic-level trolling over a microphone, is laughable. It's the kind of amateur sensibilities that can break suspension of disbelief, something a high school kid would do at a Dungeons & Dragons table, rather than anything a real flesh-and-blood character would do. Worse yet, we're taking a break from this incredible tension to squeeze in a cheap laugh. All that tension we built up is gone, and we have to start all over again to put it back. It's a waste, really, because the intro does a really good job of putting that up to that point, building that tension and establishing the stakes quite well. Comedy, such as sarcasm, quips, and one-liners, should be used like a surgeon's scalpel. If you're making a comedy, obviously this rule doesn't apply, but for a break, for a laugh, it's like washing the palate clean for your audience. Notice that in films like the Christmas classic Die Hard, this welcome to the party, pal quip is at the very end of a very tense scene. It's used to apply brevity and put a break in the tension. Now, right after that, we're calm again, recovering from the tension as as the audience is also recovering from the tension with a laugh. This is true of any emotion you're trying to evoke with the tone of a scene. There's no part in a romantic scene between two characters where you suddenly want to take a break from the date to defuse a bomb. There's no defusing a bomb scene where you want the bomb squad guy to take a break and call his girlfriend and talk about his feelings for her. There is no one that's looking at the lewd frat house comedy and trying to find an Oscar-worthy monologue. What we take away from this is respect for the scene and the emotion you're trying to convey. Brevity is fine when applied correctly, but should be used as a segue to the tone of the next scene. Yeesh. The master of Kung Fu and friendship is also a master of vanishing acts. Between the holidays and yet another break, I'm back again. At the very least, I never come back empty-handed. In my time away, I wrote the sequel to Project Phoenix, and I am so excited to say that Heaven's Crest is available in ebook and paperback. Oh, you like that? Well, what are you waiting for? Get your hands on this today. Check the links in the description box down below. You can sign up for my newsletter as well, get all the latest goings-on with the Dragon's Dream saga. Help out the Master of Kung Fu and Friendship by hitting that like and subscribe button to hear about new videos. And as always, I'm DC Ferguson. Now have fun and get crafting.